Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, Episode 15, Khan's Great Plan. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of what happens within this episode. So to be honest, not a lot happens within this episode. We basically start the episode with Khan complaining that Yuzu put him in a dress and glued a flower on his ear as an earring. And he's very upset by this because the earring won't come off, and even when Ichigo tries to pull it off, it's still there. So he decides he's going to run away, and he goes through some trials and tribulations. First, as he's running away, he's trying to look for a new owner, some new place to stay. He sees some high school girls that he knows are in Ichigo's class, and he pretends to lay on the ground, hoping they'll pick him up. But while one goes to pick him up, the other one steps on his face, calling him dirty, and then he accidentally makes a noise. They realize that he's spoken, and he gets up and runs away, and then one of the girls is on a track team, so starts to chase him. So that part fails. Then he continues to wander about, and at some point, after wandering around and coming across unfortunate circumstances, he finds himself at Urahara's shop, and he's going in there to try to steal weapons that he can then use against Ichigo. But he is found by Jinta, who basically rips him and makes him even dirtier, kind of makes him a wreck. So then he decides to go run back, and near the end of the episode, he goes and finds Ichigo and basically apologizes for running away and, is so happy that Ichigo's his owner. Of course, he says this while hugging Rukia instead of Ichigo. And Ichigo didn't even realize that he was missing or tried to run away. So that's his little subplot that goes through it. And then the other kind of thing that happens is Rukia is realizing that after the appearance of a Menos Grande, the Shinigami realm or like Soul Society is going to be notified and figure out what's happening in the town because that's not an everyday occurrence. So people are going to be sent to investigate. There was that guy who had come from the Shinigami Soul Society ahead of time that had seen her and Ichigo. And so she realizes that her time is almost up and spends basically the entire episode worrying about it before, at the very end of the episode, leaving a note thanking Ichigo for everything before leaving the clinic. And then we have just little snippets of everyday life, Ichigo and his friends eating lunch on the roof at school, Rukia joining Inoue with the girls for lunch, a gym class, basic everyday occurrences. Once Ichigo does retrieve Khan, he does have Ishida sew him up, and that happens. And then the very, 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 very end of the episode is the appearance of Renji and Byakuya. And then we also meet the cat, the black cat, who is Urahara's closest friend. But yeah, not a lot happens in the episode. So now we've been reminded about what happens within the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. And as always, we will rank on our two ranking lists. The first, of course, is the mostly objective ranking list, and then the personal ranking list second. So as always, we'll first start with our mostly objective rank values. And the singular positive that we had was that we were introduced to a multi-arc supporting character, which was Yoruichi Shihoyan. Anyways, Yoruichi is in her cat form, and we do later on meet her Shinigami form, but right now she is a cat. And she basically arrives at Urahara's shop, He greets her happily. She then also tattles on Khan when he tries to break into the shop. And then at the end, she warns that they are here, and this is just before we get our glimpse of Renji and Byakuya. Now, I'm going to only honorably mention Byakuya and Renji at this point because I don't feel that they were really introduced. They showed up for like 30 seconds to a minute at the very, very, very end of the episode, so I'm considering that teasing the characters, not an introduction, so they aren't worth any points. But because does Yoruichi does have several different scenes, even though they are small scenes, I am considering that her introduction, and that is why it is worth a positive 3 points. However, then we have our negatives. So the first one is that it is worth -1 point for a setup or recap episode. This episode had a couple of flashbacks to remind us of the close calls that Ruki has had and what might have alerted the Shinigami realm, or Soul Society, as it's called in Bleach. And then I would consider this a setup episode because basically throughout the episode, Rukia's plotline is essentially anticipating and worrying about what comes next, which is setting up that there is something coming next. And then at the end of the episode, we get that cliffhanger where we have been introduced to two new Shinigami, who obviously Urahara and Yoruichi are worried about, which means that they are probably a big deal, which is also setting up the fact that they are a big deal. And then the second negative that we have, which is worth -4, is that there was no main plot significance to this episode. It was filler and honestly not a very good one. Like, it wasn't very entertaining. I know we probably were supposed to be entertained. You know what? I'm going to talk about that on the personal side. Main reason why it's worth -4 points is that it was a filler episode. There was no main plot significance or progression or anything like that. It was just kind of a there to kill time and take up space episode. Which brings us into the negatives for the score, and as the lowest score possible is a 1, that makes this episode a 1 out of 10. Which brings our arc rankings so far on our mostly objective ranking to, in first place, The Day I Became a Shinigami, The Shinigami's Work, The Older Brother's Wish, The Younger Sister's Wish, Fight to the Death, Ichigo vs. Ichigo, June 17th, Memories in the Rain, Unbeatable Enemy, Back to Back, A Fight to the Death, Greetings from a Stuffed Lion, A Gentle Right Arm, Flower and Hollow, The Legendary Quincy, Beat the Invisible Enemy, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip, Cursed Parakeet, and then in last place is this episode, Khan's Great Plan. So first off, obviously you can probably tell this wasn't a high scoring episode for me personally either. There were some comedic moments throughout the episode, but like I was beginning to say on the mostly objective ranking, there's probably where we were supposed to get our entertainment from was Khan. However, Khan, number one, made a horrible first impression as a character. Khan is very much a pervert, disgustingly so, and just genuinely has like an annoying voice. It's not really a likable character. I mean, the stuffed lion thing is it would be a cute stuffed animal to own, but as a character, not very compelling or likable. And so, spending a lot of time with him on the episode on this like adventure, meant to be funny, and there were a couple of comedic moments, but ultimately, because the character is dislikable, so is, his subplot. We got a little bit in the store meeting Yoruichi, but again, we haven't really learned much about them other than them being introduced as Urahara's greatest friend and closest friend. And then we get our daily life moments. And again, they tried to be funny with like Asano being kind of stupid. And to a certain extent, that could be kind of funny, but it was also kind of like an over the top sort of reaction. There were a couple of funny moments between Ishida and Ichigo because they have similar personalities, and this is noted by some side characters when they have lunch together, and then later when he goes to him to fix up Kon after Kon is roughed up by Urahara's shop attendants. But ultimately, like, not a lot happened. And then Rukia, again, her time was pretty much spent worrying and flashing back to various moments where alarm bells were sent off to imply how close Soul Society is from coming to investigate and finding out what she's been up to, and that Ichigo is a side Shinigami. Apart from the cliffhanger at the end, literally nothing much happened, and as compared to past fillers, also not super entertainment or entertaining. And because of the lack of entertainment, I have decided that while there were a couple of comedic moments, and those are worth some positivity, not enough to really increase the score that much, so I'm giving it a 2 out of 10. Which brings the arc ranking so far in our personal ranking to the Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip, which is an example of a really well done filler episode, because that one was hilarious. Back to back, A Fight to the Death, The Older Brother's Wish, The Younger Sister's Wish, Beat the Invisible Enemy, A Gentle Right Arm, The Legendary Quincy, The Shinigami's Work, Cursed Parakeet, Unbeatable Enemy, June 17th Memories in the Rain, The Day I Became a Shinigami, Greetings from a Stuffed Lion, Flower and Hollow, Fight to the Death, Ichigo vs. Ichigo, and then in 15th we have Kon's Great Plan. And that brings us now to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far, where we are going to be ranking each of the arcs against each other. And we'll start on the mostly objective ranking with the addition of 1 point for this episode. We are at 124 out of a maximum possible score of 200. And on the personal ranking side, we are at 91 out of a maximum possible score of 200. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, Episode 15, Kon's Great Plan. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.